I've been thinking a lot lately about the dominant culture in which we live here in the US. I feel like we don't talk about culture enough. This isn't meant as a criticism. Culture is inherently elusive. It is, as they say, the water we swim in. The thing is, culture is not universal. Neither is water, really. While all fish swim in water, you can bet a fish would have something to say, if it could say something, about the water if they were suddenly moved from the ocean to a mountain lake. That is not the same water. And just as that fish would want to address the fact that there was not enough salt to meet their needs in that lake, we too need to talk more about what is healthy and what is harmful in the culture we inhabit together. There is a lot to say about culture, but today I would like to talk about how our culture relates to our ability to heal. To begin, I'm going to ask you to accept as true the following statement about the dominant culture around us. I'm not making it up. There is some solid research I can point you toward if you would like to read more. We live in a culture that normalizes individualism and either or thinking, among other things. Normalizing is something we do as human beings. It can be helpful. We have normalized brushing our teeth twice a day, for example, which has obvious benefits. The problem with normalizing particular things is that when something is normalized, it makes it very difficult to challenge if it has destructive consequences. Look at the floating island of plastic in the Pacific Ocean and ask yourself why we still sell millions of cases of bottled water every month. Now, before I go further along in discussion about individualism and either or thinking and how it relates to healing, I first do want to acknowledge that we are each individuals. In her memoir, The Country Under My Skin, author Gioconda Belli wrote about a moment in her childhood when she suddenly realized that she would be alone in her body forever. I can still feel that surge of adrenaline, she wrote, the sudden awareness that accompanied this irrefutable fact. In a single terrifying instant, I became acutely aware that nobody could share my inner space, feel what I felt, listen to my innermost thoughts. I could never experience what it would be like to be someone other than the little girl I was, in my uniform of pleated skirt and white blouse. It dawned on me that I could never look at myself directly in the face. I could only do it through a mirror. For a few days, I was quite disconcerted by the enormity of my realization. I was baffled by the random design that had made me born where I was born, arbitrarily deciding I would come into the world with a silver spoon in my mouth, instead of as one of those broken, scraggly little waifs who ran after our car, banging on the windows, begging for change, and in whose eyes I saw, with painful clarity, the very same bewilderment I felt. We may not all have the same experience of a sudden awakening to the singularity of self, but it is true we can only ever be ourselves, and that we will never truly know what it means to be anyone else. It doesn't mean we can't try. We're each living in an indisputably individual life. My road is just mine, but here you are, walking along it with me. We share the same thirst, the same starts and stops, the same betrayal and joy and devastation and seeking, and also we don't. In her poem titled Revolutionary Letter Number 2, Diana de Prima writes, "The value of an individual life, a credo they taught us to instill fear and inaction. You only live once. A fog in our eyes. We are endless as the sea. not separate. We die a million times a day. We are born a million times. Each breath, life and death. Get up, put on your shoes, get started. Someone will finish. Tribe, an organism, one flesh breathing joy as the stars breathe destiny down on us. Get going, join hands, see to business. Thousands of suns will see to it when you fall. You will grow 1,000 times in the bellies of your sisters. So we are all ultimately alone, and we are all one interconnected organism. It is possible for both things to be true. Month of November is often when I find myself thinking about how well I did with my garden this year. The first hard frost has happened. I've been working my way through the autumn rituals that come with putting that small plot of dirt to bed. The wilted tomato vines, dahlia, and squash leaves always seem to finish the season with some powdery mildew, which I don't want to invite into my compost pile, so they go out to the curb in brown paper bags. I turn the wild late season arugula into its bed to seed for next year. Clipping back the raspberries who are set on overtaking the blueberry bush, who is doing its own work of dropping its leaves as if to wave defeat or play dead for the raspberries and trick them into slowing their march. My garden is very small, and I love seeing plants flourish and thrive, but when you have limited space, you have to listen as the garden teaches you how much and what to plant. Every spring, my eyes are bigger than my garden. I think to myself, I know there's only enough room for 2 zucchini plants in this spot, but I look at the seeds and I think we can fit 3. It is in August and September that my short-sightedness grows into view. Maybe it's stubbornness. This is the season, this time of year, when every year I recommit to listening to the plants. I will pull the raspberry vines back further this year. And when they start creeping over toward the blueberry this year, I will tell them no. This year, I will put my foot down. A seasoned gardener knows that leaving space is as important as sun and food and water. The wisdom comes over time, like rings in a tree spanning out one after the next with autumn lessons, informing the choices of the following spring. The wisdom comes from the teachers that surround the gardener, the plants and insects, the molds and unripe fruits. I am healing. Slowly, my garden is teaching me to stop thinking my brain can rewrite the truth. My garden is telling me to pay attention to our shared body, an organism, one flesh, breathing joy as the stars breathe destiny down on us. I'm learning to see it year by year, healing from the individual life, healing from the destructive belief that I am separate from any other living thing, and therefore that I might find the answer without listening to those around me. Healing which does not mean I am no longer alone in my body. It means I no longer live by that credo, you only live once. That I am alone in my body in a sense, but I am also alive in yours, and you are alive in me. There is movement in the kind of healing I'm trying to describe, a breaking of the dam that separates me from you, that prevents a flow from the self to the world beyond. It's an orbit. There is instinct to it and grace. It is not all about me, and I am a part of it. We witness this movement in water cycles and plant cycles. We see it in evolution and under microscopes in laboratories. We name it in poetry and strive to embody it as seekers. We also see evidence of when it is blocked. In the novel Transcendent Kingdom by Yaa Gyasi, the main character is at a party listening to the guests. Whenever I listened to them speak about issues like prison reform, climate change, the opioid epidemic, in the simultaneously intelligent but utterly vacuous way of people who think it's important simply to weigh in, to have an opinion, I would bristle. I would think, what is the point of all this talk? What problems do we solve by identifying problems, circling them? When I read her words, I found myself nodding. I mean, the work of identifying problems is important work, but only as a step on the way toward addressing them. When it is treated as an intellectual exercise, the most nuanced understanding of a problem becomes worse than meaningless. The equivalent of knowing that the blueberry bush is struggling because its resources are being stolen by the raspberries, but not even considering that you have the ability to strategically change your raspberry policy. Identifying problems as an intellectual exercise is a symptom of someone who does not see themselves as part of the interconnected whole, who has not discovered how to get going, join hands, see to business. We are each a part of each other. I know that to be true. Perhaps in this moment we are becoming more aware of that truth. The air I breathe in includes air you have exhaled. The water in my body will find its way back to the ocean. Maybe these strange days where we don't get to be together with one another as much, where we are grasping for ways to connect, maybe they are helping us to see just how connected we are to one another. Maybe that realization is scaring people. Because when we acknowledge that we are all connected, then we must recognize that what has happened to any of us has happened to all of us. So what does it mean to heal from an individual life? Healing from an individual life means realizing that the wounds that any of us experience inevitably affect the wider world. And so we invest our time and resources to tend to our traumas. We leave space to treat our wounds. It is not indulgent, it is necessary. We do no one any favors by admiring the ability to keep your problems to yourself. If we do not prioritize our own healing, it affects everyone, and collectively, we are able to help each other heal. That is true for a church community and a city and a country and a planet. Healing from an individual life means we begin to relish the opportunity to consider other experiences beyond our own, because we realize that each of those experiences enrich our collective perspective. They help us move the ball down the field. The more we discover the complexity that comes from diverse wisdom, the more we realize how incomplete the libraries of our minds have been, the more we discover false assumptions and incomplete solutions. Healing from an individual life means we begin to celebrate what we can learn from our mistakes, perhaps even more so than what we learn from our successes. A culture of perfectionism and defensiveness is replaced by a recognition that mistakes will happen and a curiosity about how those mistakes might offer opportunities for growth and learning. Healing from an individual life means before we start strategizing about how to solve a problem, we first ask who is most directly impacted by this problem, and have they participated in articulating the problem itself and coming up with a possible solution? Do they have a seat at the table? And then we ask, who else might have already started working on this challenge? We know inherently that our individual knowledge is limited, but our collective knowledge is expansive. We know that our individual time is limited, but our collective time is expansive. And what we can accomplish when we work together and build on each other's efforts is incredible. That if we can let go of taking credit, we all get to take the credit together. Get up, put on your shoes, get started. Someone will finish. There is not a particular place to begin. The trick is to keep the movement going, like an infinity loop. On one side, there is you, learning and unlearning, healing hurts, discernment, rest, food, sleep. There is your spiritual practice, exercise, love, your closest people. Amidst that internal work, even there, you are not alone. And moving from you to us, which is just as important. Tending to our collective garden, always thinking about how to expand the definition of us. If I told you there is no such thing as charity, how would that affect how you think about service? Our call to this world is not for someone else. It is for tomorrow, maybe. It is for what might be possible, not in some Pollyanna way, not with the expectation of some idealist's fantasy. It is the imperfect gardening, deciding how much and what to plant, considering the spacing, thinking about how much light and water and food we will need. It is the act of doing it together, healing and growing, healing and growing. May it be so.